This is something we've been working on with all of you for the past 18 months. So with that in mind, I might at this point say that we are delighted to be launching the National Strategy for Volunteering, the first in 10 years, and one which is truly unique on a global stage. We don't see, and we haven't been able to find evidence of a national strategy anywhere in the world which looks like this one, done in the way that this one has been constructed. The unique part of it is the contribution that you've all made. So, with that in mind, let me invite back to the stage National Strategy Director Sarah Wilson to take us through your vision for volunteering in Australia. Thanks very much, everyone.
She's back. She's wearing a different hat this time though. I am now the National Strategy Director for Volunteering Australia, and it is my absolute pleasure to be here to launch your National Strategy for Volunteering for 2023 to 2033. We had a vision to co-create and co-design a national strategy for volunteering with the entire volunteering ecosystem. What do we mean when we say volunteering ecosystem? Every single person in this room and stakeholder with an interest in volunteering. We spoke to as many people as possible, and there is an explanation of all of that in the national strategy, but I'll take you through a couple of things to begin with. We wanted to design something that would ensure that volunteering in the future is safe, supported, sustainable, and fun. The project methodology took quite a unique approach, as Mark said. We partnered with global experts in participatory design, ThinkPlace, and used their methodology on the 4 voices of design. We had 4 working groups, a National Strategy for Volunteering Council, and alongside that, all of the research and consultations that we did that formed the evidence base for this project. It is something that has been a labour of love for 12 months, and many of you were on that journey with us over time. We did the project in 4 phases. We started with a discovery phase, and this was the first time that I met so many of you. And I must say, this kind of feels like a family reunion, because as I look out now, I see so many faces that I either met in person or saw across the screen. So it's absolutely delightful to share this moment with you this afternoon. In that discovery phase, the idea was that we talked to as many people as possible about the current state of volunteering, but we also wanted to hear their ideas for the future. We wanted to understand people's challenges, but also the opportunities that are out there, the innovative things that are taking place in community every single day. We took all of that information, and midway through last year, we produced a Discovery Insights report, and that summarised all of those consultations. We talked to over 400 stakeholders in that early stage, and we came up with 12 insights that described the state of volunteering in Australia today. That is still on the website if anyone's interested in reading it and hasn't already, but it set us up for what came next in our process, which was our visioning phase. This was everywhere that we came and did face-to-face workshops across the country and spoke to you about your visions for volunteering. Many of you who came to those will remember me and my giant poster, the fact it would never stay stuck up to the wall, and we sat together and we individually and then collectively came up with our vision for the future of volunteering in Australia. We did 16 workshops in 14 locations, and we got to talk firsthand to over 300 different people who participated in those stakeholder consultations and told us their thoughts, shared their fears about volunteering, and also came together for the first time as an ecosystem to discuss what we can do collectively to ensure volunteering thrives into the future. Alongside all of this happening, we commissioned the Volunteering in Australia research. It was a project that involved a population sample that included volunteers and an organisation survey that many of you probably filled out. And that Volunteering in Australia research is a contemporary evidence base for the current state of volunteering, but also a summary of emerging trends and things that might happen into the future of volunteering. Without being too doom and gloom, one of the things that our research did find is that, as many of you would know, volunteering has not shown significant signs of recovery since COVID, and projections do not predict that the numbers will increase to pre-COVID levels anytime soon, which makes this project all the more important, because without a national strategy for volunteering and something to guide us, we don't have a hope of boosting those numbers back up and making sure that volunteering is something that we still have as part of the social fabric of our communities. After the visioning phase, we moved into our build phase. And this was a really intensive process where a core design team made up of 24 experts from across the volunteering ecosystem came together. We did 8 workshops in 4 weeks, and we iteratively took all the feedback from the discovery phase and the visioning phase, and we designed a draft national strategy. And twice a week, we had those core stakeholders over Zoom calls, actually going through all of the material that everyone provided and produced as a part of the project in the lead up to that point. It was no mean feat, let me tell you. And if you could see the online whiteboards of where we were pulling all the visions together and things like that, you would be astounded with just the pure volume of information and great ideas that we received. At the end of that process, we had a draft. And hopefully many of you have seen it before, but if you haven't, it is also still available online for anyone who's interested. We then went back and talked to more people. So in our testing and refining phase, we took that draft and we went and tried to fill gaps with stakeholders and areas where we hadn't been before and to connect with voices that we hadn't heard from. We went to the top end of Australia, it was very warm, and we also went nearly to the bottom end, it was very cold, so complete disparity there, to get perspectives from First Nations people and those who work with them, and also from a part of regional Australia that is experiencing some pretty significant demands in terms of their volunteering. And then we also went west again, because any excuse to go over to the lovely, beautiful Perth, and took all of that feedback and came back into our core design team and included it in the final national strategy for volunteering. We also received over 100 survey responses on the draft strategy and received significant numbers of open submissions and other contacts from stakeholders who were interested in sharing their thoughts on what we had identified. It's the moment you have all been waiting for. The National Strategy for Volunteering 2023 to 2033 is being launched right here today at the 2023 National Volunteering Conference. After this, yeah, well, actually, yes. I've rushed through the process a bit because this is the stuff you all want to see, but it was an absolutely incredible effort from everyone who contributed to the project. And we spoke to thousands of stakeholders, but many people on more than one occasion. And we're still in the throes of figuring out how much in-kind support that we received, but hundreds upon hundreds of hours of in-kind support were volunteered essentially to the project from our working groups, our core design team, everyone who participated, even through their day job that meant they had to change their life around to be at our consultations, and also through the authors of our volunteering research papers, which I hope many of you have had the chance to read. Your vision for volunteering in 2033 is that volunteering is the heart of Australian communities. And underpinning that vision is 5 statements about what we hope will change over the next 10 years. We want more people volunteering more often. We want volunteers to feel respected and know that their contribution makes a difference. We want volunteering to be properly valued, designed well, and supported sufficiently, adequately, and always considered first up, not as an afterthought. We want diversity in volunteering to be recognised, but also celebrated and supported every single day in community. And we want to realise our individual and collective potential so that volunteering in Australia can thrive. The vision, getting to one vision was exceptionally difficult, which is why we have an overarching statement, and then underneath that we have these 5 dot points. When we took all of the visions that were designed during that visioning phase and pulled them together, these were the themes of what stuck out as the most significant things people thought volunteering needed to do going into the future. And it's really easy to look at them and think that these already exist, and in some pockets they do, but we have a lot of work to do against these parts of the vision to make sure that in 10 years' time we can unequivocally say that volunteering is at the heart of all Australian communities. Alongside the vision, there are 3 focus areas with underpinning aims. The first one is about the individual volunteer experience and that individual potential. And this is all about making sure that volunteering is easy to participate in, inclusive, accessible, and safe, and that we're not accidentally, or sometimes not accidentally, taking advantage of volunteers. The second pillar is all about the community and social impact of volunteering. And this is about comprehensively valuing volunteering to make sure that we understand just how integral it is to the functioning of not just our communities, but also inherent in us as human beings. And the third one is around the conditions that we need in place for volunteering to thrive. And this is really important because without supporting infrastructure for volunteering, it's not possible. A lot of people think that volunteering just happens. We are a victim of our own success in so many circumstances. But we in this room here, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, all know that volunteering is something that takes considerable time, effort, and energy, and the rewards far outweigh any effort that we put in, but it doesn't just happen, and it doesn't happen for free. And putting conditions in place for volunteering to thrive over the next 10 years will make sure that volunteering continues to be something that every Australian and every person in this country can participate in and benefit from. Under our 3 focus areas and aims, we have 11 strategic objectives. And in the draft, these were phrased as systemic shifts, but they have now become the 11 goals of the National Strategy for Volunteering. Underneath each of these strategic objectives is an explanation, a case for change, what the research evidence says about the current state against each of those things, and more information about what we need to do to achieve these 11 goals by the end of 2033. These might not resonate with everyone, but they were the 11 most important things that stakeholders told us throughout the co-design process, and they form the structure and the framework for the national strategy itself. But what does success look like? If we implement the national strategy well, and we realise all of these objectives and our vision and our aim, in 10 years' time, we should see 3 things. Firstly, that the volunteer experience has been improved. Sometimes we forget that there's a human at the centre of volunteering, and that experience is so integral to making sure that our volunteers feel valued, but also so that they can make the best use of their involvement and feel like their contribution actually matters. And this is a critical part of what volunteering should be for everyone who's involved. The second thing is that we're comprehensively valuing volunteering properly and underpinning it with sufficient resources and support internally and externally. And thirdly, as a natural byproduct of all of this, we should see an increase in the number of volunteers. But we also need to make sure that we're having conversations about quality and quantity in terms of the volunteering experience and how many volunteers we have in Australia. That is broadly the National Volunteering Strategy Framework in a nutshell. The document itself is nearly 90 pages. We have written a summary for those who heard that and thought, oh gosh, I don't think I can read 90 pages. But all of the information from the last year of co-design is in there, and you can see how we got from this time last year to today having a national strategy for volunteering. Over the course of the year that I was out having conversations with different people and connecting with them online, one of my favourite things to do, and I encourage everyone to do this when you're back in your organisations or with your family, is I ask people why they volunteer. If you're ever having a bad day, just ask someone you know who volunteers why they do it. And these were 3 of the volunteers that I met along the way. And I had 2 rules: don't swear and don't cry. I can't read them because I'll cry. This is why we need a national volunteering strategy, because this is why we do what we do. And for every single person in this room who volunteers themselves, I know that you read those quotes and you feel within yourself that that is your experience as well. Someone said early on in the process, how are we including the voice of volunteers? And the reality is that volunteers design this strategy because every single person that I spoke to over the last year either is a volunteer or has been a volunteer in the past, because we're all here because we are passionate about the same things. And that voice is weaved into the very fabric of the national strategy itself. So what's next? 4 things to happen in 2023 to make sure that the national strategy is set up to succeed over the next 10 years. That is creating a governance blueprint, a monitoring and evaluation framework, the first 3-year action plan, and a model for shared accountability so we can make sure that every actor in the volunteering ecosystem is involved in the implementation, benefits from it, and that we continue to hear from the voices of those who are most important and who need to be a part of this process as we move forward. Thank you very much for your time. The national strategy will be available on the National Volunteering website, National Strategy for Volunteering website, immediately after this session. But I will now welcome CEO Mark Pearce back onto the stage to introduce our panel.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Thank you. It's good to hear that you're enthusiastic about the work that you put in your vision for volunteering in Australia. This is an opportunity, I suppose, for you to meet some of the people on the council who oversaw the development of the national strategy. So, if I might, and these people are all waiting to the side. Please come and grab a seat, and I'll introduce each one as they take their seats. To my immediate left, Grainne O'Loughlin is the CEO of Karitani, and Grainne chaired our National Strategy Council. Grainne joined Karitani as CEO in 2014 and has over 30 years' experience in public health, community services in the UK and in Australia. Professor Melanie Oppenheimer, one over, is the person who chaired our research working group. She sat on our council and was part of the National Strategy's core design team and co-authored one of the volunteering research papers. Melanie is an Australian historian and researcher, and we were very pleased to have Melanie as part of the process. Leigh Simmonds, where are you, Leigh? Right here. People are out of order for what I've got in my notes. Leigh is Senior Manager of Patient Advocacy and Corporate Social Responsibility and the Reconciliation Action Plan lead at Pfizer Australia. Leigh chaired our Corporate Volunteering Working Group, and this is such an important part of the volunteering ecosystem as we move forward, and has a clinical background in palliative care. Leigh also has a Master's in Public Health from the University of Western Sydney. Dr. Jessie Harman, Director of Rotary International, chaired our Volunteer Management Working Group. Jessie has a PhD in Social Entrepreneurship, an MBA, and has held senior roles at Rotary International for over 2 decades. And finally, you've already met Sarah. Sarah Wilson, our National Strategy Director, holds degrees in arts, in law, and in psychology, is just taking on a master's, moving into a PhD. Well done, Sarah. So, we don't have a lot of time, and there are a couple of questions that I'd really like to ask this panel. So, perhaps to start off, if I may, I'd like to hear from each of the panellists about which element of the national strategy resonates with you. Grainne, can I start with you?
Of course you can, thanks. It's lovely to be here, and I think you've heard from Sarah, from Mark and from Professor Parry. You've also just seen a quick overview of the vision, and as I have been very close to this as we've chaired the council and with many of you as members and being consulted, it really was about volunteering being properly valued in our communities and considered. I suppose it was about the opportunity to influence policy, reform, and to bring all of the sectors together, so government, non-government, corporates, volunteers, and I think it's been a journey that I haven't ever seen before in my 30-year career, to bring this ecosystem together to create that shared vision, and I think that's extraordinarily powerful and such a wonderful foundation.
It is. Grainne, thank you. Leigh, might I ask you to give us some thoughts?
Yes, I think the conditions for volunteering to thrive are very important, particularly in the corporate area. Mark, we had lots of conversations about, corporate volunteering being an opportunity to unleash human potential towards some of our community's greatest needs and problems. But in order to be able to do that, there need to be a set of conditions, communication, and I guess a flourishing ecosystem that is properly financed and supported for that to happen well. We know that we can actually transform people's neurobiology and chemistry by amazing volunteering experiences. If you haven't seen that research, please look it up. But it can be transformative, not just for the individuals who are volunteering, but of course for the communities they're volunteering into. And this is the area that I'm particularly interested in terms of the accountability and the, the implementation. how we're going to support volunteering, involving organisations to interact with corporates to achieve mutual objectives.
Thanks, Leigh. Melanie, might I task you with a response?
Thank you, Mark. I chaired the research working group, so I've always approached this task with the hat of the researcher on, and there's not a page, I think, of this new national strategy where research, evidence-based material has been used to inform the strategy. And for me as a researcher, and for all the other researchers in this room and outside in the world, I think that is a benchmark that is incredibly important, both now and moving forward.
Thank you. Jessie.
I think there were two elements of the strategy that resonated with me. Firstly is the very explicit and clear recognition of volunteering as an expression of personal identity. We often think about volunteering in terms of service delivery, but this strategy clearly identifies that volunteering delivers many benefits for volunteers themselves. And because that is so important, it relates to the second element, and that is the role of the volunteer manager. The person that supports those volunteers, supports the organisation, and fundamentally make sure that the volunteering experience is meaningful for everybody involved.
Thank you. Sarah, I'm going to ask you. You have a unique view into this process, and I'm particularly interested to hear your response.
Yeah, I've been working in this space for about a decade, but there wasn't a single conversation that I had for the last year where I didn't learn something new or see something from a new perspective. And the thing that stands out to me the most, and we pull this out in the national strategy, is around realising that individual and collective potential. Because what I realised over the co-design process when I talked to everyone and heard all of these diverse viewpoints is that the knowledge is out there. We're all fantastic at this, and what's been missing is something to bring it all together. But this isn't about innovation and change as much as it is about how we figure out how we work together to create a volunteering ecosystem where we can achieve all of this individually and collectively to be able to say in 10 years' time that volunteering is at the heart of Australian communities. So it was, I think, the most striking part of this project really was just hearing how talented, passionate and enthusiastic everyone out there is about this, and finally now having something that we've designed together, we've co-created, that sets a course for volunteering over the next 10 years.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we can agree with that. It's great to have a co-designed national strategy that speaks to our voices and something that we can all collectively and individually take forward. In the national strategy, we've identified some key indicators of success. What does success look like? This is an interesting question. What does success look like? What are your hopes and aspirations for how the national strategy can lead to real change over the next 10 years? And Leigh, I might ask you to respond to this one.
Sure. So working with the corporate volunteering or employee volunteering working group, there were a lot of themes that came out in our conversations and a lot of visioning around success, where it should be expected and should be normal for corporations to make a contribution to the volunteering involving organisation to ensure that that experience and that involvement is not only valued but is an excellent experience for everyone and delivers on impact. In the corporate world, where I sit at Pfizer, there's not one time where we ask any organisation that we're engaging with to give us things for free. And so it astonishes me still to this day that there's some kind of expectation that volunteering should be for free. We recognise, obviously, we bring our skills and people and time, and there's a cost benefit to the organisation who is giving their employees time to that. But I see the vision of success in 10 years' time where I'm not having conversations about whether this volunteering opportunity is for free or not.
Thanks. Thank you. So we have a national strategy for volunteering, which charts a course from today through to 2033. What do you think will be the most important parts of taking this forward and implementing this strategy? Melanie, you probably know more about the history of volunteering than anyone. What are your reflections?
Well, I think the hard work now begins. So, I mean, the last 12 months, for those of us, I mean, everyone in this room, I'm sure, has had some input, and some of us more than others. But really, it starts now. And it's going to be a challenge because we've just come out of really 3 to 4 years of the COVID pandemic, and I've already been in sessions this morning where we are seeing the problems associated with that pandemic. We're not quite sure what's going to happen, but in the volunteering space, it's absolutely critical that we get that infrastructure and investment and support from governments, from philanthropists, from foundations, from everyone. Volunteering is not free. It is absolutely integral to Australia. But if we want this strategy to succeed, if we want to be sitting here in 10 years' time and then ticking off what we've achieved, we've got a lot of work to do. And I think we actually need to have an Australia-wide conversation with those who do volunteer, but also those that don't.
Thank you. I agree 100%. There's a lot of hard work to be done from here. It was a really hard job bringing this together. Exciting, dealing with passionate people, but we start today, and I think we have a good place from which to start. The conversations that we've had will be conversations we will continue. We look forward to building the relationships that we have. We look forward to moving forward with the implementation of this national strategy. Sarah has outlined the stages and the process of how this will take place. But we don't do it by ourselves. This isn't a Volunteering Australia strategy. This is a national strategy. I'd like to take the opportunity to sincerely thank the panel for their wisdom, their guidance, their contribution, the many hours of time that they made available to the project itself to get this to where it is today. So on behalf of Volunteering Australia, thank you all so very much. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Mark's cut us a few minutes short, so I'm going to take advantage of that time and go off script. And I'd actually really love to hear from Jessie in her role in Rotary about your reflections from your recent international volunteering conference, which was also here on Ngunnawal land, and what reflections there are from that and the process that we went through over the last year.
You know, I think participant engagement is at the heart of Rotary. I think it's at the heart of all volunteering that we do. And it's been absolutely central to the way that this national strategy has been developed. You know, those principles of co-design, collaboration or engagement have been incredibly impressive. You know, I think we are all here for the same reasons, you know, driven by the same aspirations and motivations. And we are all just so thankful this pandemic is over.
Yes. And any other final reflections from anyone?
I would just like to say that it's really important that we resource the next phase of work. We've had a lot of energy and effort. We've been supported by government to create the vision and the strategy, to operationalise it and to implement it, and to keep that co-design element of engagement, of governance, of communication does take resourcing. And, you know, I think that's the next biggest hurdle we have, is how we deliver on that 10-year vision. And it is for the greater good. It's all of those elements, but it really is about social cohesion, reducing isolation, improving our communities. And I think that's the heart of everything that we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Sarah, I shall hand back to you.